Picture the bustling streets of ancient Alexandria in the year 69 BCE. Marble columns gleam in the sunlight, and the great lighthouse, the Pharaohs, one of the wonders of the ancient world, towers over the harbour. Sailors unload ships heavy with spices from Arabia, papyrus from the Nile, and gold from Nubia. The city is a crossroads of empires, where Egyptian priests in white linen pass Greek philosophers debating in the shade, and merchants haggle in half a dozen languages. It is here, in this city of wealth and culture, that Cleopatra VII Philopata is born. She is a princess of the Ptolemaic dynasty, descendants of Ptolemy the Soter, one of Alexander the Great's trusted generals, who took Egypt as his share of the spoils after Alexander's death. For nearly 3 centuries, the Ptolemies have ruled Egypt not as native pharaohs, but as Greek monarchs, keeping their language, their customs, and often marrying within their own family to preserve the royal bloodline. But Cleopatra is different from the start. She is said to be intelligent, observant, and quick to learn, qualities that will set her apart in the cutthroat world of dynastic politics. While her family's preferred language is Greek, Cleopatra will go on to master Egyptian, becoming the first Ptolemaic ruler in generations to speak the language of her people. This decision is more than symbolic, it is strategic. It marks her as a ruler who wishes to connect with all Egyptians, not just the Greek elite. Her education is as rigorous as it is broad. In the palace schools, she studies philosophy, rhetoric, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. She learns the art of debate, the history of Egypt's pharaohs, and the workings of the Nile's annual flood. She also trains in politics, an essential skill for survival in a royal household where loyalty shifts like sand in the desert wind. And the Ptolemaic court is dangerous indeed. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, nicknamed Auletes, the flute player, is a weak ruler, more interested in music and luxury than in governing. His reign is marked by heavy Roman influence, crushing taxes, and growing unrest among the people. At times he is forced into exile, leaving the throne vulnerable to rival claimants within his own family. From a young age, Cleopatra sees firsthand that royal life is not a fairy tale, it is a chessboard, and survival depends on reading the moves before they happen. By 51 BCE, Cleopatra is about 18 years old. Her father has died, and in his will he names her co-ruler with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who is just 10 years old. As tradition demands, they are also married, an arrangement meant to solidify power within the family, but co-rule is an illusion. Behind the boy king stands a cabal of advisors and generals who seek to control Egypt through him. Cleopatra quickly emerges as the more capable ruler, appearing on official documents alone and even minting coins with her own image, an unprecedented move for a female monarch of her house. This independence does not go unnoticed. Tensions grow between Cleopatra and Ptolemy's faction. Political disputes turn personal. By 49 BCE, a coup forces Cleopatra into exile in Syria. Her throne is gone, her position in jeopardy. Most rulers in her situation would accept defeat, but Cleopatra is no ordinary queen. From Syria, she begins to gather an army, preparing to march back into Egypt and reclaim her birthright. She knows she cannot do it alone. Egypt's destiny, and hers, will soon become bound to the greatest power in the Mediterranean, Rome. And it is at this moment, with Egypt on the brink of civil war, that a Roman general arrives in Alexandria. His name is Julius Caesar, It is 48 BCE, and Cleopatra is in exile. Her throne in Alexandria is occupied by her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, and his advisors, men who see Cleopatra's ambition as a threat to their own power. She is camped with a small, loyal force in the deserts east of Egypt, waiting for the moment to strike. That moment comes in the form of a Roman fleet. Julius Caesar, fresh from victory over his rival Pompey in the Roman Civil War, has arrived in Alexandria. Pompey had fled to Egypt seeking refuge only to be murdered on Ptolemy's orders, a decision meant to please Caesar but which horrified him instead. Now Caesar finds himself in the middle of Egypt's own civil war. He has come to restore order but also to protect Rome's interests. Egypt's grain keeps Rome fed, and Rome cannot afford instability here. Cleopatra sees her chance, but she cannot simply walk into the palace. The city is controlled by her brother's faction. So she devises a plan, one so bold it will be told for centuries. The ancient sources tell it differently, but the most famous version, written by Plutarch, goes like this. Cleopatra arranges to be smuggled past the guards, rolled up in a carpet, or more likely wrapped in a linen sack, carried as a gift to Caesar's quarters. When the cloth is unrolled, out steps the queen herself, dressed in her finest robes, unafraid, smiling. It is a masterstroke of theatre. Cleopatra presents herself not as a beggar seeking help, but as a ruler worth allying with. Caesar, 52 years old and the most powerful man in Rome, is captivated not only by her beauty, but by her intelligence, her wit, and her understanding of politics. She speaks to him as an equal, discussing Egypt's place in the Mediterranean, the risks of letting Ptolemy's advisors hold power, and the benefits of restoring her to the throne. The alliance is sealed personally and politically. Caesar agrees to support Cleopatra's claim, but Ptolemy's faction will not give up without a fight. What follows is known as the Alexandrian War. Caesar, with just a small contingent of Roman troops, finds himself besieged in the palace quarter, surrounded by Ptolemy's larger army. Cleopatra stays by his side throughout, using her knowledge of the city and its politics to aid his strategy. The fighting is fierce. Streets are barricaded, siege engines pound the palace walls, and the great library of Alexandria is partially destroyed in the chaos, a loss that will echo through history. Caesar sends for reinforcements, and when they arrive, the tide turns. In early 47 BCE, the Battle of the Nile decides the war. Caesar's forces rout Ptolemy's army. The boy king himself drowns in the river as he tries to escape. Cleopatra is restored to the throne, now ruling alongside her youngest brother, Ptolemy XIV, who is just 12 years old. But this is Cleopatra's Egypt now. She makes sure her authority is clear, appearing on coins, presiding over ceremonies as the goddess Isis reborn, and reviving ancient Egyptian traditions to strengthen her image among her people. Her bond with Caesar deepens. In June of 47 BCE, she gives birth to a son, Ptolemy XV, Philopator Philometor Caesar, known to history as Caesarion, Little Caesar. Though Rome's laws forbid Caesar from marrying a foreign queen, and though he never officially names the boy as his heir, Cleopatra presents him proudly as Caesar's son. In 46 BCE, Cleopatra sails to Rome with Caesarion. She stays in one of Caesar's villas across the Tiber, and her arrival sends shockwaves through the city. Rome has never seen anything quite like her, this foreign monarch who walks with the poise of a goddess, whose wealth rivals Rome's own. and who wears gold and jewels like armour. Some are dazzled, others are scandalized. Statues of Cleopatra, styled as Isis, are erected in Caesar's temple complex, further angering conservative senators. For nearly 2 years, she lives in Rome as Caesar's guest, watching him reshape the Republic into a dictatorship. But in March of 44 BCE, everything changes. On the Ides of March, Caesar is assassinated by a group of senators who fear he has grown too powerful. Rome is thrown into chaos. Cleopatra, fearing for her life and her sons, returns to Egypt. She is once again alone on the throne, her position precarious. Rome's future, and by extension Egypt's, will now be decided by new men: Caesar's chosen heir Octavian and his loyal general Mark Antony. Cleopatra knows she will need allies if she is to survive in this new order. And soon one of those men will summon her, not to Rome, but to a city called Tarsus, setting the stage for one of history's most legendary partnerships. The year is 41 BCE. Rome is fractured in the wake of Julius Caesar's assassination. 2 men dominate the political stage: Gaius Octavian, Caesar's 19-year-old heir, and Mark Antony, Caesar's trusted general and co-ruler of Rome through the Second Triumvirate. Together with Lepidus, they rule an uneasy empire, dividing territories like pieces on a map. But the East, Egypt, remains wealthy, strategically vital, and under the rule of Cleopatra VII. Mark Antony, stationed in the eastern provinces, faces trouble. His fleets need supplies, his troops need pay, and his rivals in Rome whisper that his loyalties are wavering. He also wants answers about Egypt's role after Caesar's death. Cleopatra had aligned herself with Caesar. Had she supported his assassins, or will she support Antony? And so, Antony summons her to meet him in the city of Tarsus, in modern-day Turkey. But Cleopatra will not arrive as a supplicant. She will arrive as a queen. The preparations are legendary. Cleopatra commissions a grand barge, its stern covered in gold, its purple sails billowing in the wind, the scent of incense and perfume drifting across the water. She reclines beneath a canopy dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, surrounded by attendants dressed as Cupid and nymphs. Musicians play as the oars dip in perfect unison. When Antony comes down to the river to meet her, he is not receiving a guest. He is stepping into a performance. Cleopatra's entrance is theatre, diplomacy, and seduction all in one. She knows Antony's reputation, a soldier with an appetite for luxury, spectacle, and pleasure. She will give him all 3. Antony is captivated. Banquets follow, each more lavish than the last. The tables groan under the weight of roasted meats, rare wines, and golden platters. Cleopatra's wit is as sharp as her presentation. She matches Antony in conversation, in humour, in ambition. By the time she sails back to Alexandria, she has secured not only his political support, but his devotion. Over the next few years, their bond deepens. In 40 BCE, Cleopatra gives birth to twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene. Antony returns to Rome to manage politics, but the pull of Egypt and of Cleopatra is strong. By 37 BCE, Antony is back in the east and back in Cleopatra's arms. They plan campaigns together, share state councils, and dream of a new order, a vast eastern empire ruled jointly by them and their children. Antony showers Cleopatra with gifts of territory: Cyprus, parts of Syria, lands along the coast. She becomes richer than any queen before her, commanding influence from the Nile to the Levant. In 36 BCE, Cleopatra gives birth to another son, Ptolemy Philadelphus. She is now the mother of 4 children, 3 with Antony and 1 with Julius Caesar. But in Rome, Octavian seizes on the optics. He paints Antony as a man bewitched by a foreign queen, abandoning his Roman wife and his Roman values. The propaganda war begins in earnest. The breaking point comes in 34 BCE with the donations of Alexandria. In a grand ceremony, Antony and Cleopatra sit on golden thrones, dressed as gods, Antony as Dionysus, Cleopatra as Isis. Before the gathered crowd, they divide the eastern territories among their children. Caesarion is declared the legitimate son and heir of Julius Caesar, ruler of Egypt and Cyprus. Alexander Helios receives Armenia and Media. Cleopatra Selene is given Cyrenaica and Libya. Ptolemy Philadelphus gains Syria and Cilicia. For Octavian, this is treason dressed as pageantry. He takes the story to the Roman people, claiming Antony has betrayed Rome for an Egyptian throne, that he intends to make Alexandria the capital of the empire, and that Cleopatra, this foreign queen, is pulling the strings. War becomes inevitable. But the declaration issued in 32 BCE is not against Antony. It is against Cleopatra herself. Rome's Senate names her the enemy of the state. The lovers know the fight will be brutal. They begin to gather their forces, fleets, soldiers, and allies from across the east. The stage is set for a confrontation that will decide not just the fate of Egypt, but the fate of the ancient world. It is 32 BCE. Cleopatra and Mark Antony stand on the deck of a warship, staring out at the glittering waters of the Ionian Sea. Ahead lies the small promontory of Actium on the western coast of Greece. Behind them, the future of Egypt and the fragile dream of their joint Eastern Empire. They have staked everything on this moment. Rome, under Octavian's leadership, has declared Cleopatra the enemy of the state. The propaganda has been relentless. Antony, Rome's own general, portrayed as a man enslaved by love for a foreign queen. Cleopatra as a scheming temptress who aims to rule the Roman world from Alexandria. But the lovers are not without strength. Their combined forces include over 200 warships, tens of thousands of infantry, and the wealth of Egypt at their back. They anchor their fleet in the Gulf of Ambracia, ready for the fight that will decide their fate. On September 2nd, 31 BCE, Octavian's admiral Agrippa moves in. The Battle of Actium begins. The fighting is brutal and chaotic. Roman galleys slam into Egyptian and allied ships. Arrows darken the sky. Catapults launch flaming projectiles across the decks. For hours the outcome hangs in the balance, and then it happens. Cleopatra's flagship, with its distinctive purple sails, suddenly turns and sails for open water. Whether this was a planned escape, a calculated move to save the treasure on board, or a reaction to seeing the battle turn against them, historians still debate. But Antony sees her ship moving away. Without hesitation, he abandons the fight and follows her. The rest of their fleet, leaderless, falls apart. Octavian's forces seize the day. The loss at Actium is more than a military defeat. It is a political catastrophe. Antony and Cleopatra retreat to Alexandria, knowing Octavian will not stop until they are destroyed. For a brief moment, life in Alexandria resumes its glittering facade. Banquets are still held, music still plays, but everyone knows the city is living on borrowed time. Cleopatra begins construction of a mausoleum, a magnificent tomb that will serve not just as a resting place, but as a final statement of her royal power. In the summer of 30 BCE, Octavian marches on Egypt. His legions sweep through the Nile delta, cutting off the city. The walls of Alexandria are ringed with Roman soldiers. It is here that the lovers' tragedy reaches its climax. A false rumour spreads through the city. Cleopatra is dead. Hearing this, Antony, devastated, falls on his sword, but the wound is not immediately fatal. When word reaches Cleopatra that he still lives, she orders him brought to her. He is lifted, bleeding, into the mausoleum where she has taken refuge. There, in her arms, Mark Antony dies. Cleopatra is now alone. Octavian enters Alexandria in triumph. He meets with the queen, offering her terms, but his intentions are clear. He will take her alive to Rome to be paraded through the streets in his victory procession, a living trophy of his conquest. For Cleopatra, this is unthinkable. She has lived as a goddess queen, the descendant of pharaohs. She will not die in chains. On August the 12th, 30 BCE, Cleopatra prepares for her final act. She dresses in her royal robes, adorned with gold and jewels. She takes with her 2 loyal attendants, Charmian and Iras. The exact details of her death are shrouded in mystery. Ancient writers tell us she arranged for a basket of figs to be delivered to her, concealing within it a venomous asp. Others believe she applied poison directly, perhaps a swift-acting concoction of hemlock and opium. What is certain is that when Octavian's men burst into the chamber, Cleopatra is dead, lying upon her couch with an expression of calm. Iras is dead beside her, and Charmian, barely alive, adjusts the queen's diadem before collapsing. The Queen of Egypt is 39 years old. She has ruled for 22 years, through civil wars, invasions, and political storms that would have destroyed lesser rulers. With Cleopatra's death, the Ptolemaic dynasty ends. Egypt is absorbed into the Roman Empire, its treasures carried off to Rome, its independence gone. Caesarion, Cleopatra's son with Julius Caesar, is captured and executed. Octavian cannot risk a living heir of Caesar challenging his power. Her children with Antony, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus are taken to Rome and raised by Octavian's sister Octavia. Cleopatra Selene will one day become queen of Mauritania, carrying a fragment of her mother's legacy into the next generation. Octavian returns to Rome as the unchallenged master of the Mediterranean. In a few years he will take the title Augustus, becoming Rome's first emperor. Cleopatra, in Roman propaganda, will be remembered as the dangerous foreign queen who almost toppled the Republic. But over time, her legend grows beyond the politics of her enemies. Poets and historians portray her as a seductress, a strategist, a victim, a goddess, a patriot. Art, literature, and later theatre will immortalise her story, her meeting with Caesar, her golden barge at Tarsus, her tragic death in the shadow of the asp. She remains, even now, one of history's most captivating figures, the last pharaoh of Egypt who fought to the very end to keep her throne, her country, and her dignity. From the marble palaces of Alexandria to the decks of warships at Actium, from whispered conspiracies to public pageantry, Cleopatra's life was a constant battle between love and power, survival and surrender. She may have lost her kingdom, but she never lost control of her story. And more than 2,000 years later, we are still telling it,